Good afternoon. I would like to begin by acknowledging the previous winners of the Henschke Award. This is an impressive list of individuals. Many of these men and women were true pioneers in brachytherapy. There are Astro presidents and gold medalists on this list. I am very humbled to be on this list. I can say with conviction, however, that I do not deserve this award. I am extraordinarily grateful, though, for the recognition of my peers. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Henschke himself. Many in this audience are too young to have known this man. I entered radiation oncology in 1990 and never met him, but I have spoken to many who knew him. At the conclusion of this talk, I will provide a brief biography of the man, but at this point, suffice to say, he lived a very full life. As humbled and grateful as I am to be recognized with this award, I must admit that I've had significant speaker's block. For the first time in a long time, I was at a loss as to the subject of this address. As is my habit, when I am stuck, I admitted as much to my wife and asked her what I should talk about. With a twinkle in her eye, she said, "Why don't you talk about me and the kids?" It would be very easy to spend 20 minutes describing the triumphs and disappointments of the Lee clan, but for some reason, I wasn't sure that that would be appropriate. I did compromise, however. Here is a recent picture of my people. Everybody's got to have people. I then asked the organizers of this meeting for some guidance as to the subject that I should speak about. The basic answer was, you can do whatever you want. One went so far as to suggest that I make sure I include some history and good pictures. Well, here are a few images that I've used frequently in the last several years. In fact, I used this slide in Chicago in 2007 when I discussed quality as it relates to prostate brachytherapy. These are two images of the same event, the rape of the Sabine women from classical Roman history. The image on the left is from the 17th century, painted by Nicolas Poussin in the French neoclassical style. The image on the right is from Picasso, painted about 40 to 50 years ago. One can argue until late at night over which work is superior. Despite the obvious visual differences between the two pieces, most art scholars will agree that each piece is of very high quality. I considered exploring the issue of quality once again, but when I looked at the agenda for this meeting, with an emphasis on quality, I thought that one more lecture on quality might be too much. At this point, I was back to the drawing board. The lazy part of me said, well, why don't you just repackage one of your canned talks? In the last few years, I've created a canned talk that discusses equipoise in clinical research and another that describes levels of evidence. Maybe I could move some slides around, but I decided not to do this either. Then I thought I could perhaps spend 25 minutes telling you what I decided not to talk about. But that didn't seem right. Now, as it happens, I was reading a book entitled Educating Physicians, A Call for Reform of Medical School and Residency. At the time, I was notified of this award. I highly recommend this book to anyone who plays an active role in the education of health professionals. It integrates the latest findings from cognitive science and how people learn and calls for reforms of undergraduate and graduate medical education. The book contains the passage that you see on this slide. Commitment to excellence is a hallmark, some would maintain the hallmark, of professionalism in medicine. Expertise is likewise a commitment, not an attribute. There are two components of this passage that are of interest to me. First is the word excellence, and the second is the idea of a commitment, an ongoing effort. I was closer to the subject that I was seeking. At this point, my mind wandered back to my Greek classes as an undergraduate, to the notion of arete. Arete is perhaps the most articulated value in ancient Greek culture. For those of you that don't read Greek, here is the Latinized version. In the 21st century, arete is frequently translated to mean virtue or excellence. But the early Greeks understood arete as more than that. Arete in the original sense was something closer to being the best that you can be, or reaching your highest human potential. It is this aspirational component of arete that I intend to focus on today. The name of our scientific organization contains the word brachytherapy, which is derived from Greek, and it is ancient Greece that I, perhaps unsurprisingly, will use as my inspiration today. According to Greek myth, Aesculapius, the god of healing, was abandoned as a baby on a hillside. He survived by suckling from a nanny goat and was protected by a guard dog. The story is brought to life in this painting by Giovanni Tognoli. The infant Aesculapius was rescued by a shepherd attracted by the baby's dazzling aura, enhanced here by the bright white coverlet on which he lies. Tognoli emphasizes the nurturing qualities of the goat and the watchfulness of the dog. It's difficult to see, but in the foreground, a snake winds itself around a branch in a natural allusion to the symbol of Aesculapius and medicine itself. And so we come to medicine. How do medicine and arete combine? Or more directly, how can we practice arete in the practice of medicine, brachytherapy in particular? Before I answer these questions, remember that arete is aspirational, but it is not theoretical. It is practical in the original Aristotelian sense. Arete involves excellence of things that are useful. The man or woman of arete is a person of the highest effectiveness. They use all their faculties to achieve real results. So what do physicians do that is useful? Caring for patients is at the heart of what most physicians do. The commitment to excellence in the patient care domain is commonly described as expertise. This is an illustration of the Dreyfus model of skill acquisition. For our purposes today, the specifics are not as important as the general idea that there is a progressive trajectory. In the novice stage, a person follows rules as given without context, with no sense of responsibility beyond following the rules exactly. Competence develops when the individual develops organizing principles to quickly access the particular rules that are relevant to the specific task at hand. Hence, competence is characterized by active decision-making. This is the objective of graduate medical education. Residents, upon completion, are expected to be competent. Proficiency and expertise is shown by individuals who develop intuition to guide their decisions and devise their own rules to formulate plans. The progression is thus from rigid adherence to rules to an intuitive mode of reasoning based on tacit knowledge. Arate is explicitly linked with human knowledge. The highest human potential is knowledge, and all other human abilities are derived from this central capacity. A woman of Arate recognizes two important characteristics of knowledge and expertise. First, expertise is not an end state that, once attained, requires no upkeep. It is dynamic. Furthermore, expertise is situated in the sense that it depends very much on context. Expertise in one area does not guarantee expertise in another area. This is an old image taken from a paper published nearly 30 years ago that illustrates the beginnings of image-guided transperineal brachytherapy. The present modern transperineal technique has evolved considerably. So the brachytherapist who practices Arate understands that clinical expertise is a progressive process, and that knowledge and expertise in this domain is dynamic, and that it is situated. Now I want you to consider a broader conception of expertise. Expertise that recognizes the importance of improving care for patients. The practitioner of Arate recognizes this broader idea of expertise and is committed to improving care for all patients. The Arate practitioner is curious and is constantly looking for ways to improve the care provided. To help elaborate on this broader definition of expertise, I will return to a concept that I discussed at the ABS meeting in 2007. Reflective practice. Simply put, reflective practice involves thoughtfully considering one's own experiences in applying knowledge to practice with an eye towards improvement. This is not a new or original idea. It has been developed by educators such as Dewey and can be traced back to the work of Socrates. It is rooted in the notion of inquiry. It forces us to question what it is that we know and how we come to know it. In Donald Schoen's original description, reflective practice included coaching by a mentor or an expert. For those in training, reflective practice may be an apt method, but many of us have completed our formal training. Whom should we rely on for coaching? I say that we should rely on our own self-knowledge, obtained by critical review of our own practice, mediated by interaction with our peers. Let me give you a concrete example. This is the only quantitative information that I will show you today. This is from a paper published in 2000, and it shows the V100 of the first 63 cases that I treated with prostate brachytherapy at Wake Forest. The results are not impressive. The red line is 80% V100 that I would consider to be a low bar as far as quality for an implant in 2011. In fact, I think my colleague Kent Wallner still shows this slide as an example of malpractice. It is important to remember that at this time, the significance of dosimetry was poorly understood. In fact, the wisdom of the time indicated that 80% of the dose to 80% of the gland was probably sufficient. We now know in 2011 that this is not true. By reviewing carefully the post-implant CT scans of these early patients and sharing these results with my teammates, I am convinced that the team developed a better understanding of the procedure and made subtle technical changes that led to better dosimetric outcomes. I'm not suggesting that everyone should go to these lengths, namely creating a peer-reviewed manuscript, but I do feel very strongly that we should all closely review our outcomes, especially those procedures that are new to us or we perform infrequently. The information presented at this meeting should help you to improve your own practice. This is one more slide from 2007. I invoke my own hero of heroes, Socrates. For an iconoclastic classical studies major with a passion for teaching, Socrates is the role model. He was executed for corrupting the youth of Athens, and his name is used to describe the method of teaching, whereby a question is answered by another question. We have no evidence that Socrates wrote anything himself. Instead, we rely on contemporaries such as Plato and Aristophanes. Look at this quote from Socrates. Socrates states that the unexamined life is not worth living. Note his boldness. He doesn't mince words. He doesn't say that the unexamined life is less meaningful than it could be, or one of many possible responses to human existence. He simply and clearly says, it's not even worth living. I entered the lecture in 2007 by paraphrasing Socrates and contextualizing his statement to aver that the unexamined practice is not worth practicing. Thus far, I've considered patient care and inquiry from the perspective of the individual physician. Now let's consider the process of becoming a functional member of the community of physicians and a colleague among healthcare professionals. This is part of being a physician that is underappreciated and rarely discussed. How does a brachytherapist practicing arate act within this domain? Well, they come to meetings like this. This is a picture that I've borrowed from Astro of an e-contouring session. This is one of the most popular elements of the Astro meeting, and I am very proud that the ABS has incorporated these collaborative, interactive sessions into the ABS schools and the annual meeting. This is how active learning takes place, with authentic, hands-on, clinically relevant exercises that inform all of us. The arate practitioner is eager to learn from her colleagues and to share what she knows. Another role that physicians take on is as an advocate. This image is taken from the New York Times original report published on Father's Day of the brachytherapy events, the Philadelphia VA. You've seen this image at least 5 times at this meeting already. Since then, many brachytherapists and physicists have rallied together and taken direct political action. I'm very proud of my colleagues who have stepped up, given of their time and expertise in many forms. Whether testifying in front of Congress or working with the NRC, this tragic event has catalyzed various stakeholders to work together to ensure that brachytherapy remains an option for appropriate patients. Remember again that arate is primarily concerned with effectiveness, and in the political domain, it is likely that collective action is more effective. Now let's return to Dr. Henschke. I don't know if he studied classical antiquities, although I suspect he did, given his age and the German curriculum at the time. He certainly exemplified arate and is a concrete example for all of us. He had a grand vision but remained eminently practical. In the next few minutes, I will highlight just a few of his more important contributions. There are a few brief biographies in the peer-reviewed literature for those of you who want to learn more, and I encourage you to read more about this remarkable man. Perhaps his most important contribution was the development and refinement of a true remote afterloading device. This is an image from one of the early papers. Dr. Henschke knew that remote afterloading was used in other contexts, for example, teleradium, And he was aware of the disadvantages of the first afterloader described by Wallstum. Henschke's method would use small, high-activity cesium sources and cycle them back and forth during treatment. Changing the effective dwell times could create multiple dosimetric arrangements. Quoting from his paper, with teletreatment, all undesirable radiation exposure is avoided, and with the 3 cycling sources, no loading or exchange of sources is necessary, thus obviating the need for a large stock of radioactive sources, loading equipment, and storerooms. Intracavitary radiation therapy thus reaches the same level of simplicity and safety as external radiation therapy. Dr. Henschke is also acknowledged to have been influential in developing the Janus Cobalt-60 machine. This machine used low-energy cobalt sources and was designed for treatment facilities in rural areas and underdeveloped countries. The approach involved placing the cobalt in a holder in the room between 2 treatment rooms. The lead shielding could be removed to treat a patient in either room or to protect against exposures while people were working in both rooms. The machines were installed in Nigeria, Liberia, Jamaica, Haiti, Tanzania, India, and several states in the United States. Dr. Henschke still holds the original trademark for this device. Dr. Henschke didn't just invent these machines, he brought them to the people in need. During his chairmanship at Howard, he would train many African American radiation oncologists, and Dr. Henschke became one of the most vigorous participants in the African exchange programs, traveling frequently to consult with startup programs. He donated Janus therapy machines for use in African countries where the resources for modern high-technology treatment centers were not available. He managed to establish 10 centers in 9 countries. He died on June the 29th, 1980, at the age of 65, of a heart attack, according to the New York Times, following a small plane accident in Tanzania, while on a mission with his colleagues for the Tanzania Tumor Center. He lived a truly remarkable life, a life which clearly and unambiguously exemplified Arete. This is my final image. The Greeks personified many concepts in the stories we know as Greek mythology. In the whole of Greek mythology, the goddess Arete plays but a small role. The only story of the goddess Arete that survives was originally told in the 5th century BC by the sophist Prodicus. The story concerns the early life of the hero Heracles. The story is retold in this beautiful image from Annibale Carracci, an Italian Baroque painter. The painting is presently housed in the Capodimonte Gallery in Naples, Italy. At a crossroads, the goddess of virtue, Arete, appeared to Heracles as a young maiden and offered him glory but a life of struggle. The goddess of vice, Kakia, offered Heracles wealth and pleasure. In the end, Heracles chose to follow the path of Arete. Speaking of those that choose to follow Arete, the goddess of virtue says to Heracles, quote, "When comes their appointed end, they do not lie forgotten and dishonored, but they live on, sung and remembered forever." My friends and colleagues, remember the remarkable life of Dr. Henschke, and remember Heracles. I hope that you, like them, will make the right choice. Thank you for your attention.